doesn't care to follow the rule of the law. It is a Fiji where the Prime Minister is Attorney General
Fiji
and his ministers, where the Prime Minister is Attorney General and his ministers, which brought them to this Parliament, the Constitution, which brought them to this Parliament in the first place. They make their rules and disregard the law as and when it suits them. We have a Parliament where the Speaker, without following the standing orders, without debate, has decided that parliamentarians can speak in languages other than English and say a Christian prayer, excluding those of other faiths. A complete defiance of the standing orders and the spirit of the Constitution. We have a judiciary where the sitting Chief Justice has been suspended for frivolous matters. We have independent constitutional officers.
Order.
We have independent constitutional officers forced to resign or suspended with no regard for the Constitution and their independence and due process. Mr. Speaker, we have intelligent, diligent and professional civil servants removed, terminated, suspended and sidelined without rhyme or reason or due process. We have our regulatory processes being eroded, and illegal directives are issued because ministers, their political cronies, and newly appointed civil servants believe that their interests supersede the law. We have the Prime Minister almost every second day stating how he will remove the Constitution and thinking of circumventing the proper procedures laid out in the Constitution itself.
Order.
We have the Rambuka-led three uneven-legged stool government stating its intention to dismantle FICAC, even though there is a constitutional necessity for its existence. His government is ignoring the fact that we have ratified the United Nations Convention Against Corruption and the fact that we need such an independent body to eradicate systemic corruption and hold all public officers accountable and maintain our credibility with our donors, bilateral partners and multilateral development banks. We have ministers in the three uneven-legged stool government directly or indirectly stating that the policies they promised during their campaign will now not be delivered. One recently stated that those announcements were made in the heat of the moment. It was one of the three deputy prime ministers.
Order.
By the way, Mr. Speaker, the three deputy prime ministers for a country of our size is a global record. And of course, Mr. Speaker, every single member of the three uneven-legged stool government is a minister or an assistant minister. Indeed, a record for Fiji, and perhaps even for the world. It would appear, Mr. Speaker, it would appear that buying loyalty or bribing one to obtain loyalty is the new norm. Civil servants, including permanent secretaries, teachers, and those in government-related companies, are no longer recruited, appointed, or promoted on objectivity, impartiality, and fair competition, ability, education, experience, and other characteristics of merit. It is now who you know, your ethnic group, your province, whether you're a political supporter or crony, how much you flatter the powers that be, or even perhaps how much money you may have paid. We now have an environment, Mr. Speaker, where people are worried to speak openly. I'm not kidding. They believe they will be subjected to unjustified and illegal accusations. Freedom of expression is under threat. Can you shut up? Freedom of expression is under threat. Social media is vile and toxic. Supporters of these three uneven-legged stool government are making extremely racist and religiously chauvinistic comments, and indeed threats, and getting away with it. These are even on pages of those who can remove those comments, but it is allowed to be perpetuated for the sake of political expediency. No police action. You have a divisive Prime Minister and his government and supporters who are dividing Fiji so rapidly that it's shaking our constitutional safeguard of common and equal citizenry to its core. That's one for you, Biman Prasad. Yet, only those who seemingly make comments critical of the government are threatened or hauled in by the police or have illegal stop departure orders or are monitored or declared persons of interest. The fast with the comment, "Let love shine," is the biggest con job. It's a hoax, and idiotic and hypocritical of the highest degree. It is very sickening because as in the 80s and early 90s, what is said is exactly opposite to what is happening on the ground. Mr. Speaker, this is the brief context within which the President of the Republic of Fiji opened Parliament. Mr. Speaker, I know that when we were in government and when you were in opposition, the then opposition had chastised and berated previous presidential statements because of political motivations. I do so today, Mr. Speaker, not for political reasons, but because the President has failed to protect the Constitution, the rule of law, and failed to halt the resultant chaos that is insidiously and rapidly creeping in, and the impending disaster that is going to befall upon our beloved country, that will fall upon our people, upon our economy, and upon our future generations. Mr. Speaker, the President of the Republic of Fiji, as head of state, in whom rests the executive authority of the state, and who is the Commander-in-Chief of the Republic of Fiji Military Forces, failed to acknowledge the fact that the very Constitution which he is supposed to uphold is being stripped away almost on a daily basis. As the Commander-in-Chief, he has failed to provide proper guidance to the RFMF. In short, Mr. Speaker, he who previously espoused to subscribe to the values of the Constitution has now tragically ignored the mockery that the Rambuka-led government has made of constitutional democracy. In 2014, Mr. Speaker, in my maiden speech, I thanked my wife, children and grandchildren, and today, my great-granddaughter. I had also thanked my parents, who imbibed me with values I hold dear, of love for family, love of community, and love for country. Today, I thank them all. I grew up, thanks largely to my parents and brothers at Mothers Brothers High School, committed to the notion of Fiji as one big multiracial family in which everyone belongs to and everyone deserves substantive equal treatment. I've always tried to see my fellow citizens through the prism of their own personality and character, rather than their ethnic background or religious belief. It does not matter to me who you are or what you believe in. What is most important to me is whether you are honest, courageous, compassionate, stand up for what is right, protect the vulnerable, and treat the people the way you would like to be treated yourself, with consideration and respect. I personally believe in one Fiji in which everyone belongs and no one gets left behind, putting our nation's interests before ourselves and defending our unity as a nation against those who wish to divide us. This is why I always want to pay tribute, Mr. Speaker, to my colleagues in the military. For those of us in the military in 2006 who passionately believed in national unity, came to the conclusion that the fabric of our nation was unraveling and that the only radical intervention would enable us to pick up the threads. We had all gone through the trauma of 2000 and the mutiny that had cost us so much pain. Sitiveni Rambuka, then and now Prime Minister, made a guest appearance during the mutiny with his fully pressed uniform, lurking to pick up the spoils, but he was chased away when he was caught hiding under the table. Subsequent to those events, Mr. Speaker, it became quite apparent rather quickly that those same racist and corrupt persons who were involved in the removal of Chaudhry government in 2000 had reared their heads again. We had no choice. We took the tough decision necessary to keep Fiji united. We prevented large numbers of our people from being relegated to second or third-class citizens, halted the spiraling out of corruption, controlled corruption and elitism, the rise in provincialism, and began the task of reforming our society from the ground up. Only a radical intervention in 2006 was capable of getting Fiji back on track, of establishing once and for all the universal democratic principle that all men and women are equal. Before 2006, that was simply not the case in Fiji. But under our current constitution, it is. We have a constitution that not only guarantees genuine equality and democracy, but also provides Fijians with a range of unprecedented socio-economic rights. It puts in place institutions that will not only address the issue of systematic corruption, but also provide unprecedented levels of accountability and transparency in public life and institutions. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Republic of Fiji Military Forces for supporting the 2006 reform process. I wish to thank them for carrying out its duty in 2006 to be the ultimate guarantor of our national security, of holding Fiji together, and for the personal support I received as commander and those around me, those patriots who shared my vision of a united Fiji. It was through the unwavering and unassailable support of the RFMF and the public support garnered through nationwide consultations that led to the introduction of a genuine democracy, to lead the fight against corruption, tackle the self-serving elite, and offer a vision of an inclusive nation with fairness and justice for all. And all of this was done through our Constitution promulgated in September 2013. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, I have to inform the rank and file of the RFMF that all the philosophical commitment in years of hard work of the RFMF is now being undermined and disregarded by this government. Fijians, in particular, the weak and vulnerable, those who want actual and practical implementation of the rule of law, those who want the practical implementation of the Constitution, and those Fijians who want socio-economic stability, all look up to the RFMF to guarantee this, if and when it's under threat. I appeal to the rank and file of the RFMF to preserve their manner, to maintain their credibility and their calling, and not forsake their constitutional role. I also wish to inform RFMF that its gift and legacy, the Fijian Constitution, is being ignored and bashed on a daily basis, and the current Prime Minister wants what the RFMF works so hard for removed. Mr. Speaker, the President spoke about ILO Convention 169. I remember when he was the President of Fiji First, we had discussed numerous times about how the ethno-nationalists want to use 169 to justify the suppression of rights of others and to use it to advance elitism in Fiji. Let's come back now. We had also discussed how 169 was meant not for the countries like Fiji, but for those indigenous people who had faced genocide, had lost their lands pillaged and taken away, and their people raped and killed off. We had also discussed how it was not applicable in the Fijian context. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I was surprised he so easily rolled over and gave in to this government's ethno-nationalist agenda. The Fijian Constitution protects and recognizes the indigenous people of this country, the Tokay and the Tumen. It recognizes their uniqueness. It protects their lands and the ownership of their lands. It absolutely stops the permanent alienation of indigenous land, unlike the 1990 and 1997 Constitution, which allowed for Itoke land to be converted to freehold when Rambuka and Garse were prime ministers under the SBT and SDL governments respectively. Yet, Mr. Speaker, this almost xenophobic and whipped up inward-looking fervor at the expense of an inclusive society and at the expense of the Constitution, which states that all citizens are Fijians, But we have a Prime Minister who refuses to call citizens of this country Fijians. They have even gone to the extent of changing the government Facebook and web page from Fijian government to Fiji government. That is how ridiculous it has become. It reminds me a story, a joke about Harry in one of the villages in the Western Division. But I'll come to that sometime later on. This is how regressive a society, a country we have become. Rather amusingly, the billboard promoting the World Hindi Conference, the conference facilitated under Fiji First, refers to the Fijian government as the Fiji government and the government of India as the Indian government. We have become a laughingstock. We no longer have a mature government that feels confident enough to call itself the Fijian government, but can call other governments Australian, American, Indian and British government. How petty, how pathetic, how immature and how insecure. Mr. Speaker, the recent FBC saga epitomizes the disaster and chaos that is unfolding rather rapidly under this incompetent Rambuka-led government.
Look forward.
This debacle which FBC epitomizes the manner in which this government conducts itself. It is all over the place. It is amateurish and it is beholden to an ethno-nationalist agenda and a bunch of incompetent people. And of course, Mr. Speaker, we have the Mataningasau Faz. It is making a mockery of Itoke culture. Mr. Speaker, the amount of Mataningasaus, Sevu-Sevus, Salu-Salus we have seen in the past few weeks can be summarized as not only self-glorification, but the denigration and commodification of Itoke culture. The Rambuka government wants to go back in time to ministerial portfolios that are no longer applicable in the 21st century. But they will do it come what may, because it's all about themselves individually, not about the country or the organizations. And if their actions will cause social disruptions, they will still do it. It's dogma. For example, in the quest to get PWD come what may, they have already cost hundreds of jobs, losses for those working for Fijian and foreign companies. They will cause extra burden on government finances. They will increase operational costs of the government. They will remove modern techniques, engineering standards, and professionalism. And they've already caused grave concern amongst the multilateral development banks, bilateral partners, and specialized UN bodies. They want to use the churches to justify this agenda and anathema to the Constitution. In all of this, the President, who we looked up to because we believe that he genuinely believed the values and principles of the Constitution, has done an about turn. He has failed the Fijian people. He has failed the Fijian people, and he will go down in history as the person who aided and abetted the most incompetent and divisive government. A government set out to destroy constitutional democracy and in a modern, inclusive and progressive Fiji that the RFMF and Fiji First work so hard for. The chaos continues on this new dawn government, where a permanent dusk seems to be falling on all fronts. The PM and Deputy PM too are at loggerheads of the question of a mini budget. The Fijian public are further subjected to frightening information about the PM's secret think tank group who, without any proper appointment authority, subject countless civil servants with illegal daily instructions which are only followed because of the fear of threats of phone tapping and victimization. This government, Mr. Speaker, this government continues to appoint their cronies and failed candidates for jobs and to jobs without these positions being advertised or applications and interviews being undertaken. Pramesh Chand, who we understand failed twice to be appointed by the previous PSC, is now PS or Civil Service. And Peter Wise, advisor to the People's Alliance Party, is now the PS in the PM's office. Both men occupy this post without any proper recruitment process provided for under the Constitution. Another act of hypocrisy and corruption. The Lavol Rambuka government doesn't see the irony in constantly preaching about freedom of speech, free media, and lecturing Fijians about not fearing anyone, but at the same time taking in activists and following lawyers and journalists at night and stopping them and questioning them, Gestapo Nazi style, because they are apparently persons of interest. All of this under the watch of Minister Tiko Ndondua, who it appears is now the de facto Commissioner of Police. Mr. Speaker, under the Fijian Constitution, everyone is free to practice their religion. I remember when we had prayers in this Parliament last year, when the Speaker used to say Amen, members used to say Jisu. They were free to do so, and no one stopped them. But the Speaker cannot make that part of his formal prayer because he is to be neutral. He is to be inclusive. In the same way, government must be neutral, must be inclusive, not exclusive. Listen, Biman, that is how you build a strong and united nation. That is how you build a strong and united nation. Very simple, very just, very fair, and very Christian. Christ never thrusted himself onto others. Christ was loving. Christ taught love. Christ never imposed. Christ loved Jews and Gentiles alike. Christ did not rebuke people who came from different tribes, different ethnicities, different religions. Christ loved all because we are all God's children. Mr. Speaker, I want all Fijians, irrespective of their backgrounds, to understand what I'm saying, and I know most do. I don't expect the Prime Minister, his 3 Deputy Prime Ministers, his ministers or assistant ministers to accept or embrace this teaching of Christ. To them, Christ's teachings are to be used, distorted, and abused for their ethnic and political agenda and personal and political advancement. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that Fiji First is the largest single political party in this parliament. The next 2 largest political parties combined, Mr. Speaker, the largest 2 political parties combined could not get more seats than Fiji First. It had to take the smallest party with 3 seats, joining them for Honorable Rambuka to become Prime Minister, and all 29 to become ministers and assistant ministers. Mr. Speaker, to be the largest party in Parliament, that meant that we received singularly the most votes. It also meant that I, as the leader of Fiji First, has nearly double the number of votes than the current Prime Minister is. It also meant that many Fijians from all walks of life, from all parts of Fiji, supported Fiji First. I wish to take this opportunity to thank our supporters, our volunteers, all our candidates elected and unelected, all the families, the young and old, the men and women, and our General Secretary, who all combined to make our electoral campaign a success. We will be meeting and reaching out to you on a regular basis, starting with our own get-together with our supporters this Sunday at 2 p.m. at Lotokra Stilak High School. Also wish to pay tribute to the former supervisor of elections, a professional with international acclaim, and a man who proficiently conducted 3 successful elections. I wish to also thank the electoral commissioners and all the relevant development and bilateral partners, including the co-chairs, Australia, India, and Indonesia, of the Multinational Observer Group, the MOG, who all ensured that we successfully conducted the 2022 general elections. Mr. Speaker, thank you, and God bless all Fijians and Fiji. Ina.